Hello everyone. Today I want to talk about Charlie Kirk and some of the myth-making we have seen around him and his life since he was killed in September 2025. I hope this doesn't need to be said, but just to make sure, anything I say here about Charlie Kirk doesn't justify his assassination. I'm not happy that it happened, and I don't think anything is going to be better for anyone because he's dead. The first attempt at myth-making is brought to us by the YouTuber Shoe on Head and her video, These People Are Sick. The center point of this video is a compilation of different people being happy that Charlie Kirk was killed, and our narrator expresses her disgust with these people. Again, I didn't celebrate the killing of Charlie Kirk. I try not to become too cynical and detached about things that shouldn't be regular occurrences, like assassinations or school shootings. That's just a personal choice of mine, but I also don't share the utter disgust that Shoe on Head expresses about the people shown in this compilation. It seems fairly inconsequential to me, honestly. But it is interesting how this video lays bare a view of politics and morality that seems pretty twisted to me. Let's listen to Shoe on Head describe, quote, these people in question.
You can't say to these people who are celebrating this and justifying this, you can't say, what if that was your dad or your brother getting killed for their opinions, because they've already cut those people off. They've already cut those people off out of their lives. And posting videos and pictures of Charlie's wife and young kids will not move these people at all, because they hate their lives, they hate their families. They are atomized bug people. They are the unfortunate product of modern society, and I feel bad for them, I do. I pity them, and I wish I could help them, but I have bugman fatigue.
In a different section of the video, Shoe on Head points out that these people aren't just random people being happy about Charlie Kirk being killed, but that these are teachers, professors, HR employees, pediatricians, etc. And she puts up a news story supporting what she is saying. A news story written by Raw Egg Nationalist, who is not a journalist I'm familiar with, I think. Now, of course, it would be easy to clown on this video, given that this is the only cited news article and it's from InfoWars. But I actually want to engage on her point here. The point being that the behavior of these people is harmful, worth talking about and condemning, because these people inhibit roles in society that are influential even in just small ways, like a teacher would be. Now let's take a look at the characterization of Charlie Kirk we are given.
But I think what happened to Charlie is hitting differently because, like I said on Twitter, he was just a f***ing guy. He was a f***ing podcaster. He was a guy who talked about politics. He was a guy who had conservative beliefs. Not everyone knows a billionaire CEO or a powerful politician, but they do know somebody with conservative beliefs.
That's quite the contrast, in which someone uploading a TikTok, being happy about Charlie Kirk getting killed, becomes a bug person with influence on society, while Charlie Kirk, one of the most influential political actors of the last decade, gets reduced to someone holding conservative beliefs and talking about politics. There are very few individual people in American media who had as much clout as Charlie Kirk did when it came to influencing people directly, agenda setting within the right wing, and getting Republicans elected throughout the country. He has over 1 billion lifetime views on YouTube and led an organization in Turning Point USA with an annual revenue of over $80 million. Turning Point also has a PAC. They endorse candidates and spend money in races. He was unquestionably hugely influential on the body politic of the United States and the Republican Party in particular. Now, without a doubt, some of my viewers will see the glaring contradiction in how a person who uploaded a TikTok is judged compared to Charlie Kirk and come away thinking that Shuonhead's video must be in bad faith. In no way could you point to a teacher as an influential position in society while labeling Charlie Kirk as just a random dude. But I really don't think that's true. It's clear that Shuonhead is struggling emotionally in this video and has a hard time making sense of why what she calls bug people would behave this way and that it has a negative effect on society. What I think is much more likely to be the reason behind this rather than bad faith is an immature understanding of politics. Later in the video, Shuonhead preempts some criticism, saying that she doesn't care about the bad things Charlie has said in the past, and that he undoubtedly had, quote, bad takes, but that words aren't violence, so she disregards it. And here I just want to lay out something in detail. It's not that words are violence, but rather that if you have a political belief, you will most likely act on this political belief. And if you not only hold a belief, but spread it to millions of people and convince them to think like you, that effect becomes even larger. Those people then tend to vote for other people who hold these beliefs as well, and when successful, enact laws that make everyone else act in accordance with those beliefs. In other words, politics affects people's lives, often in profound ways, and that is true even if you are just a political influencer. It's very easy to just label Charlie Kirk a dude who talked about politics if you don't want to figure in the actual material effect on people's lives of the politics he did everything to spread throughout the world. At the heart of this is a very human inability to grasp the effects on something unless they are individualized. When a single person is shot, it's easy to see the fallout on their family and friend group and feel bad for them. That's natural, that's human. But as the group becomes larger, it becomes harder to grasp and feel any sort of emotion for them. So I want to try to individualize Charlie Kirk's effect on the world a little bit here. One of, if not the topic Charlie was most spoken out about was the issue of abortion, on which he held and propagated the belief that abortion is immoral and a heinous act regardless of the circumstance. According to him, this included even fringe cases of SA, and that there are next to no cases where an abortion would ever be medically necessary. As he said in his Jubilee appearance, it is a growing consensus in the pro-life world that abortion is never medically necessary. Now, that's a belief. It's an extremist one, considering this goes further than even most laws restricting abortion passed in recent years. It's a belief that Shuonhead probably disagreed with, but at the end of the day, it's just a political disagreement, right? Let me now just individualize the material effect of this belief and show it to you the same way that Charlie Kirk's killing has shown us the suffering of his family. In May 2023, the Washington Post published a portrait of a Florida family. Deborah Dobert had discovered she was pregnant in August of 2022, and she, along with her husband Lee and their 4-year-old son Caden, were looking forward to welcoming the 4th member of the family. Early doctor's appointments showed that the fetus was healthy and thriving, so the family started making the appropriate arrangements of buying clothes, making space for the baby in their home, and thinking about names. The name they decided on was Milo. Months later, in November, a routine check showed that their fetus had a lethal congenital disorder that prevents the development of the kidneys. Without kidneys, a fetus cannot produce the amniotic fluid necessary to help the lungs expand. Sadly, there was no way that the child she would give birth to would survive. Their request to terminate the pregnancy was denied, as the fetus still had a heartbeat, which in Florida negates any exceptions of fatal fetal abnormalities. This family, the Doberts, was forced by the state to carry that child to term, even though there was no chance for the child to survive once the umbilical cord had been cut. Months later, Deborah went into labor and was accompanied by her husband and her father, who, despite all odds, hoped for a miracle and that the baby would somehow pull through. After going through the painful, hour-long process of giving birth, Deborah and Lee held their baby and watched it struggle and gasp for air, unable to breathe. This lasted 99 minutes until Milo passed away. The family held a funeral service for Milo, and after everyone else had left, Milo's grandfather, Peter Rogel, stayed staring at the urn, trying to reconcile his own misgivings about abortion with the torment he saw his daughter and family go through. Quoting from the article, "Now he was haunted by the sound of Milo gasping for air and the sight of his body struggling to ward off a death that had been inevitable for 3 long months. To me, it's just pure torture," Rogel said. "The law has created torture." This story, which stayed with me ever since I read it and which creates a dread inside me as a young father myself, is merely a drop in the ocean of suffering of the politics that Charlie Kirk enthusiastically supported and spread. So much so that I even had trouble finding the story again, because there are just so many instances of a family going through something very similar. And don't get me wrong, Charlie Kirk didn't cause the Potter syndrome in Milo. He didn't sign the heartbeat bill into law that forced his family to go through hell. He didn't overturn Roe v. Wade. If Charlie Kirk never saw the light of day, it's not unlikely this story would have happened just the same. But in his life, he was clear that this kind of suffering was not just perfectly acceptable, but necessary to have his own fundamentalist views placated. Charlie Kirk wanted to see and did everything in his power to see come to fruition a total ban on abortion, except for when delivering the baby would end the life of its mother. And even that exception is a total joke, because in a medical emergency, it's rarely 100% clear cut like that. But what is clear to the doctor in question is that if there is a shred of doubt that delivering the baby would 100% kill its mother, his life will be ruined and he might get thrown in jail. Now, I assume Shuon Head and others will be puzzled by me even bringing up Milo's story, considering that there is no obvious connection here. And here is a point I really want to drive home. Politicians pass laws that affect the lives of people. And those Republican politicians that passed Florida's heartbeat bill in 2022 are to blame for the suffering that this family had to endure. But that is not the end of the story. This law didn't get drawn out of the hat at a random chance. Politicians, Republican politicians in this case, pass laws on issues pressing among their voter base, made to be pressing by powerful actors within their base. And on the issue of abortion specifically, Charlie Kirk did everything in his capacity as a media figure to push Republicans further to the right and create a sense of urgency among them. So no, he was not just like your conservative boomer uncle, as Shuon Head says. In his Jubilee appearance, Charlie Kirk stated that if his own 10-year-old daughter were to be S8, he would force her to deliver the baby. He was an extremist, and he spread his extremist beliefs as far and wide he could, in the stated aim of getting laws like the Florida heartbeat bill passed. Sadly, he did so with great success. As I said, the story of Milo is just one of many examples. I could just as well have picked the story of Samantha Casiano from Texas, whose fetus was diagnosed with a condition preventing the skull and brain from fully forming. Due to Texas' heartbeat bill, she also had to carry her baby to term despite there being no chance of survival. After giving birth, Samantha had to watch her daughter Halo struggle, suffocate, literally change color right in front of her for 4 hours before Halo passed away. There are, of course, also at this point probably thousands of cases where women were allowed to terminate their pregnancies due to the non-viability of the fetus, but only after developing sepsis, hemorrhaging large amounts of blood, and becoming infertile because hospitals are scared of terminating a pregnancy too early. Now, I don't want to suggest Shoe on Head is okay with any of this, but Charlie Kirk was. He was perfectly fine with this as long as he got his way. On the issue of gun violence, he now famously said that he was okay with it if that was the price the country had to pay for the Second Amendment. So I have no reason to believe that it would be any different here. And just as the story of Milo was just a random example out of many, the same goes for the issue of abortion itself. You can take your pick. Abortion, gun violence, taxation, LGBT issues, the ongoing extermination in Gaza. On pretty much every issue, Charlie Kirk worked tirelessly to make the world a worse place for anyone who was not a white male millionaire. That is his legacy and how I will remember him. Some people might say, as a response to me saying this, that we can do both. We can factor into our worldview the suffering that Charlie Kirk's death has caused the people in his life and the suffering he helped inflict on others. Sure, in theory that's possible, but we don't. There is not going to be a Shoe on Head video titled "These People Are Sick," where these people are anti-abortion zealots like Charlie Kirk and the suffering they create in society. There's only so much time in the day, and I'd much rather have my worldview informed by the tens of thousands of stories, like the short life of Milo, than one influencer being killed. The rest of Shoe on Head's video largely consists of her complaining that some people consider her right-wing or worse, when she personally considers herself of the left. I can't speak for the people leveling those accusations, but it's also not that hard to see where they are coming from. If so much of your output, like this very video, revolves around feeding off of right-wing cultural grievances, it might not be enough to throw in a line about how you support higher taxation in between. Okay, so much for the YouTube section of this video. Our next response to Charlie Kirk's assassination comes from Ezra Klein in the New York Times in his piece, "Charlie Kirk was practicing politics the right way." He writes, "On social media, I've seen mostly decent reactions to Kirk's murder. There is grief and shock from both the left and the right. But I've seen two forms of reaction that are misguided, however comprehensible the rage or horror that provoked them. One is a move on the left to wrap Kirk's death around his views. After all, he defended the Second Amendment, even admitting it meant accepting innocent deaths. Another is on the right to turn his murder into a justification for an all-out war, a Reichstag fire of our time." Here we see a similar reading to the one I criticized earlier in the video about the left wrapping Kirk's death around his views. Again, it's not merely his views that made Charlie Kirk's political influence a net negative on American society. In a vacuum, Charlie's views on abortion are just as important to me as a disagreement about which Metal Gear game is the best. It is that Charlie Kirk used his powerful position to create material harm and suffering for other human beings, an amount of suffering that dwarfs any suffering felt by his family. So that is the suffering that we should direct our attention to. The second issue here is the reduction of Charlie Kirk's views to defending the Second Amendment. If you wanted to pick a view of Charlie's that characterized his beliefs more faithfully, You could link a clip of him saying Jewish donors were funding anti-whiteness in the United States, Kamala Harris wanting to kidnap your children via the trans agenda, or arguing in favor of public televised executions. But again, the views themselves are only secondary to me. The third issue is equating the left, pointing to Charlie Kirk's views and effect on the world in the wake of his assassination, with the actual United States government using his death to even further crack down on free speech and dissent. But we'll get to the Reichstag fire in a bit. In the early section of Ezra Klein's article, he lists numerous examples of political violence recently occurring in the United States. He points to the plot to kidnap Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer, the break-in into Nancy Pelosi's house, and the near assassination of Donald Trump. A way of doing politics that deserves condemnation, no doubt. He then writes, "You can dislike much of what Kirk believed, and the following statement is still true. Kirk was practicing politics in exactly the right way." He contrasts these examples of political violence with what Charlie Kirk did, which was debating people and talking about politics. The issue is that Charlie really had no problem with political violence at all. When a 42-year-old QAnon follower broke into Nancy Pelosi's house and bashed her husband's head in with a hammer, Charlie said some amazing patriot out there should bail him out. He's on record saying Joe Biden should be jailed or put to death over his immigration policy. As one of the largest voices in conservative media, he did everything he could to prolong the killing and suffering of Palestinians. Sure, Charlie Kirk was more civil about it than some random TikTok influencers celebrating his death, but at the end of the day, he really had no problem with political violence as long as it was packaged the right way and directed at his enemies. The article goes on. American politics has sides. There is no use pretending it doesn't. But both sides are meant to be on the same side of a larger project. We are all, or most of us anyway, trying to maintain the viability of the American experiment. We can live with losing an election because we believe in the promise of the next election. We can live with losing an argument because we believe that there will be another argument. Political violence imperils that. Kirk and I were on different sides of most political arguments. We were on the same side on the continued possibility of American politics. In other circumstances, I might co-sign this section of the article, but not when in reference to someone whose organization literally bussed people to the January 6th riots, which was a violent attempt to disrupt the process of vote certification. Charlie Kirk boasted about sending 80-plus buses full of patriots to DC to, quote, fight for the president. Now, trying to be charitable, Turning Point USA didn't know it was going to turn violent that day, but this takes us back to the central point of this video. How do you think this happens? The rioters that day were relentlessly gassed up and told that the election had been stolen by the conservative media, being told that they had to fight or they would lose their country. You can't constantly push people to the brink, raising the temperature wherever you can, and as soon as it spills over, wipe your hands of any responsibility. One day after the election, Charlie Kirk was already leading a Stop the Steal rally in Phoenix. Until his death, he continued to spread the lie that the 2020 election had been stolen. Charlie Kirk wasn't interested in the continued possibility of American politics. He would have been happy if Donald Trump's plot to secure fake electors and have them be chosen by Mike Pence instead of the real ones had been successful. And is there anyone out there that can say, with a straight face, that if Charlie Kirk had lived to see Donald Trump defy the Constitution in 2028 and secure a third term, he would have any problem with it? No. And it's silly to pretend otherwise. Having now talked about two reactions from the supposedly other side of the political spectrum that Charlie Kirk was on, I'd like to move towards the myth-making happening on the right. And there are a lot of statements we could pull from, but I'd like to focus on the WrestleMania-esque memorial service held on the 21st of October, where the who's who of the Trump world all gave speeches. This service was so embarrassing that I honestly felt bad for Charlie, this being his send-off. When Charlie Kirk was shot, many people expressed the sentiment that we shouldn't focus on what he did, but on his humanity and the suffering his family was going through. That call to compassion, however, stands in stark contrast to much of what was said at his memorial service. A good number of the speakers didn't seem to care about Charlie or his family at all. It was all about the movement, the sacrifice, the martyrdom. Here's an excerpt from Jack Posobiec's speech that day. The true word for what Charlie did was sacrifice. You see, the difference between murder and sacrifice is that sacrifice is a gift. Charlie Kirk died for all of you. And the question of our time, will Western civilization endure or will it fracture in two, like so many predict? Well, I say to you that a century from now, when they write about the 2 or 3 pivotal moments that led to the saving of Western civilization, they will write that the sacrifice of Charles James Kirk was the turning point. You know, I'd love to quote something less explicit and analyze it for you, but Jack Posobiec makes it all so transparent that there is barely any room for analysis left. He literally says that Charlie Kirk's death is a gift, which I wouldn't want anyone to say at my memorial service. He says that Charlie sacrificed himself, not in life, but in death specifically, which is just not true. I'm pretty sure if Charlie had known he was going to be shot that day, he wouldn't have taken to the stage. His killing was just a thing that happened, not him giving up something for the greater good. But Charlie's death as a gift is what the right sees it as. It's not mainly a tragedy, but an opportunity to advance their political agenda. Later in his speech, Jack Posobiec makes this explicit by saying,
"We have it now. Charlie gave it to us. He gave us that last bit of courage, that last bit of fight, that last bit of grit and resolve to say no more. We are done. We are done with all of it, and we will now stand and fight, because if you took Charlie Kirk off that line, then every single one of us will rise up and we will replace that line, and we will be there and we will remind them what they did for Charlie, what they did to Charlie, and we will never, ever let them forget the name Charlie Kirk."
What you see in this section of Jack Posobiec's speech is a summary of the general meaning and purpose of this memorial service. While a regular memorial service for a person might focus on their life and the grief felt by everyone that knew them, here we see a focus on mobilization and collective empowerment. We are done. We are done with all of it. Done with what? How does this relate to Charlie's life or death at all? It doesn't. This so-called memorial service only serves to transform his death, which itself was pretty meaningless, into a collective myth. Grief into resolve and collective struggle. That's why it looks like a Trump rally, not a memorial service. Grieving Charlie is not something personal, but a political duty. His personal life is secondary to his death being proof of the hostility of the movement's enemies. What they did to Charlie, you took Charlie. Who is he talking about here? Their political enemies. The grief and anger about Charlie Kirk's sudden death is used to bind a people to a cause and justify their own hostility. One historical example of the right using the death of Charlie Kirk in this way was made by Ezra Klein and others in the Reichstag fire of 1933. But to me, that comparison doesn't really align with what we are currently seeing. The Reichstag fire instilled a fear of chaos and disorder on the German public to a degree that they were willing to give up personal freedoms in exchange for perceived security. Charlie Kirk's death doesn't have that effect. Despite the gist of Ezra Klein's article and YouTuber Shuon Head explicitly saying, "We are all Charlie Kirk," the average person won't feel significantly more in danger because of what happened to him. The more apt comparison would be the killing of Horst Wessel, a member of the Nazi Goon Squad Sturmabteilung, who was shot by 2 members of the Communist Party in 1930. As today, back then it was in no way clear that Horst Wessel had been the victim of a political assassination. The 2 men that killed him visited his apartment on behalf of his landlord to collect money. But that didn't really matter to his friend and mentor, Joseph Goebbels, who exploited his killing to political ends as much as he could. Horst Wessel became such a symbol for the Nazi movement that the Horst Wessel song, written by him, became the party's anthem and had to be sung before the national anthem. My grandma, who is in her 90s and had to sing this song every day at school, still knows the lyrics from memory. Here is historian Daniel Siemens talking about the speeches given at Horst Wessel's funeral service in his book The Making of a Nazi Hero, The Murder and Myth of Horst Wessel. I'll let you be the judge if this sounds familiar in any way. Wessel's death, Hitler proclaimed, showed the National Socialist truth that the sacrifice of one stands as a symbol for the sacrifice of hundreds of thousands in the movement. By making the supreme sacrifice, Horst Wessel set a monument to himself that was more long-lasting than stone or bronze. In centuries to come, when perhaps not a stone will be left standing in this giant city, the German liberation movement of the National Socialists and the memory of its bard will remain unforgotten in the minds of the people. The German right actually had a whole pantheon of martyrs called the Blutzeugen, or blood witnesses, people who supposedly sacrificed themselves for the cause and in such indebted the living to continue the fight. Now, of course, whenever I talk about these sorts of comparisons, I anticipate the eventual comment of, "Oh, here goes Dan again, needlessly invoking the Third Reich." But when we are talking about an event during which Tucker Carlson took the stage, reminding the audience that Jews killed Jesus Christ and low-key implying they killed Charlie Kirk, I think it's not that much of a stretch from my side. Oh, small correction here. Tucker Carlson didn't actually say Jews. He said, quote, "guys eating hummus," which isn't even subtle enough to be a dog whistle, really. The speech that invites comparisons to the German right of the interwar period the most was given by Stephen Miller, who started out his eulogy with a Facebook quote. "I am reminded of a famous expression. The storm whispers to the warrior that you cannot withstand my strength, and the warrior whispers back, I am the storm. Our enemies cannot comprehend our strength, our determination, our resolve, our passion, our lineage, and our legacy hails back to Athens, to Rome, to Philadelphia, to Monticello. Our ancestors built the cities, they produced the art and architecture, they built the industry. We stand for what is good, what is virtuous, what is noble, and for those trying to incite violence against us, those trying to foment hatred against us, what do you have? You have nothing. You are nothing. You are witnesses, you are jealousy, you are envy, you are hatred, you are nothing." What a great speech. It really makes me remember Charlie Kirk, his life and legacy. I wouldn't be the first to point out that Miller's speech shares rhetorical similarities with a speech by Joseph Goebbels called Der Sturm bricht los. Apart from both using the storm as a metaphor, both emphasize the idea of building. Our lineage and our legacy hails back to Athens, to Rome, to Philadelphia, to Monticello. Our ancestors built the cities, they produced the art and architecture, they built the industry. We are the ones who build, we are the ones who create. Those are the words that Stephen Miller used. Here is a similar image from Goebbels. Adolf Hitler is knocking at the gates of power, and in his fist are joined the fists of millions of workers and farmers. The time of shame and disgrace is nearly over. You are the witnesses, the builders, the will-bearers of our idea and our worldview. Both speeches mention revenge or talk about what the movement's enemies are sure to expect. Here is Miller again. "The day that Charlie died, the angels wept. But those tears had been turned into fire in our..." This is so cringy. "But those tears had been turned into fire in our hearts. And that fire burns with a righteous fury that our enemies cannot comprehend or understand. And Goebbels? So our dead comrade Horst Wessel wrote, and we are fulfilling his prophecy. The others may lie, slander, and pour their scorn on us. Their political days are numbered. And lastly, both speeches talk about the movement awakening and being spurred into action. From Miller's speech, the light will defeat the dark. We will prevail over the forces of wickedness and evil. They cannot imagine what they have awakened. They cannot conceive of the army that they have arisen in all of us, because we stand for what is good, what is virtuous, what is noble. And his German counterpart, well, we the people have awakened. We have risen against oppression. 15 million people have joined in an army of revenge. Apart from drawing into sharp focus how terrible of a speechwriter Miller is compared to Goebbels, it shows a similar view of politics and the movements both consider themselves part of. If you ask me if Stephen Miller straight up plagiarized a Joseph Goebbels speech, I would probably say no. It's much more likely that if you view the world through a similar lens, you end up with a similar style of thinking and speaking. And even if it was provable that Miller really got his imagery from Der Sturm bricht los, it's not like anyone would care at this point. There might be one person out there that liked what Miller was selling until they found out he's a plagiarist. But if you don't think Stephen Miller is a total lunatic by now, there's nothing I can say to convince you otherwise. Getting to the final point of this video, what I like about contrasting the rights use of Charlie Kirk's death when paired with, let's say, Ezra Klein, is how much it shows how liberals, and more broadly the opposition to the Republican Party, can't help to handicap itself. Why assist in this myth-making? Why pretend Charlie Kirk was someone who he wasn't? It's not distasteful or mean or cold-blooded to speak about someone who passed in a way that doesn't totally whitewash their impact on the world. It's actually doing a disservice to the living, because you are reshaping their understanding of not just the person, but their political impact and the impact of their politics. It robs us of the opportunity to address the very real harm that they have helped to perpetuate. While families like the Doberts, Cassianos, and thousands of others have to continue to live with their pain, Charlie Kirk, who is dead now and won't hear any of this, gets sanitized as someone who, quote, had some bad takes. It's cruel. It's crueler than any person dancing on TikTok. It's crueler than to bring up his views and their impact on the world after he was killed. The dead don't need protection. The living do. And if the suffering that Charlie Kirk's politics inflicted on the world comes secondary to your own discomfort, please just do everyone else a favor and just say nothing. There we go, folks. Small little video about something I had on my mind for a couple of weeks, although it didn't turn out that small. I hope it stays up, but with tech companies bending over backwards to appease the right currently, you never know. Not to mention that there probably won't be a cent of ad revenue coming from this video. But I'm lucky enough to make videos on topics like this because I am supported by my patrons. If you want to join them and hang out in the 3 Arrows Discord, you can join them via the link in the video description. Thank you to everyone for watching. I hope to see you next time. Have a good one and stay in the fight.